talking about building hot rods here. Not talking about sugarcoating. We're talking about everything. Knuckle busting. The rust in your fucking eyes. We're talking about building fucking hot rods. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another exciting episode of It's All About the Build. Brought to you by I.B.F.HotRods.
What's up, fam?
The fuck did he just say? What'd you say?
What's up, fam?
Fam?
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. And we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another exciting episode of It's All About the Build. You got me, Elliot Slack, and as always, over here yonder is Randy Bunting.
Hey, what's up?
We are coming to you the week of Thanksgiving. So before further ado, here's to you guys. Cheers and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Oop. For the drink. This episode is dedicated to why it costs so much to build a car.
Basically, this is going to be directed towards anybody that goes to a car show and they ask, well, how much something cost. Like when you when you watch all the videos, the movies, the shows, and it's $300,000 build. We're going to talk about why. Because just like on TV, ladies and gentlemen, a car's not going to be built in 40 minutes, I can tell you that. Or 30, or 45, or whatever.
Not even 4 months.
Right. Unless you're humping. The reason we're doing this is because one of the biggest questions we have, and I've heard over the years, is why does it cost so much? Like when they hear, well, why the hell does a paint job cost, $30,000? We're going to dive into body and paint here, and first things first, you got to tear down. So, the tear down is one of the quickest processes throughout the whole entire thing. I mean, you can tear something down pretty quick.
But you don't want it to be too quick.
Yeah. You need to document the shit out of it.
As soon as you get it, take pictures of all the parts that you may have been given. I mean, that takes a little bit of time in itself. I mean, I wouldn't say it's going to take like days to do that, but it might take you a couple hours.
Well, yeah. You're looking at a full day's worth of work just fucking tearing it. Well, not even tearing it down, but you're looking at a full day's worth of work, taking pictures of the whole thing.
If you're as anal about it as we are,
yeah.
it will.
Taking pictures of the whole thing, and then whenever you start the process of tearing it down, every single nut and bolt goes in a bag, and it's labeled. Literally, we're writing down door handle screws.
And the customer is paying for this, by the way.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's going to make it quicker down the line.
Right, you're saving yourself headaches and headaches just by doing that.
Even though we're saving time down at the end of the lane, we're still taking time up and still costing money right off the bat. We'd literally if we'll send you a bill for the first week, and it's like, well, you didn't do a damn thing. It's like, no shit. We barely even touched it, but we've done a lot. Straight out of that, after we're documented, after we tear down and everything, now we're looking at, we're looking into rust repair, and we're looking into treating the metal and prepping the metal and all that shit, getting it prepped and ready for this is all done before we get to the topic at hand, which is body and paint. If you're doing a fucking paint job right, like there's a lot of people that will just scuff old paint and put new paint on, which is all fine and dandy, but I've heard and I've seen horror stories where they scuffed the paint and everything was all kosher and shit. They painted the whole damn thing, and then all of a sudden, like, the hood's fucked up. Something underneath that they don't know about is coming through the layers of paint on top to the very top layer of paint now, and it's bubbled up, or the chemical reaction somehow is no good. Like, is there lacquer under there? They seal it somehow, and then they're putting this new water-based bullshit on or whatever. It could be just a massive headache.
Yeah, and especially if you're doing rust repair, you have to treat it as well. Like that's an extra step that most people probably, I mean, I don't want to say most people, but some people probably wouldn't do. Some shops wouldn't do is treat the rust that's there.
Well, chemical treatment that fucking actually like transforms the rust. You got rust reformers, rust inhibitors, rust transformers, whatever you want to call them.
That and some of the panels that you're working on, you may treat the surface rust or the top layer, that's the rust you can see, but there's most of the time, if you can see rust coming through, there's rust inside that worked its way up that you can't see. And a lot of times you really should be cutting all that off and treating what's underneath and what's inside.
Just to fucking seal it. Just to get, like,
yeah.
If you get into some rust, let's say you get into some surface rust.
You're talking about hours worth of work just to prep this stuff.
And even then, depending on what kind of reformer or inhibitor or whatever you have on there, you got to let that sit for 24 hours or until it dries or whatever.
Yes, technically, yes, you do. It has cure time.
Let's say you cut into something, you got some rust in there, right? Okay, here we go. So if it's not too bad and it's just kind of surface rust or whatever, you can tear down all that shit with a wire brush, a wire wheel, whatever you want to do, sanding discs, whatever, and you get it down to bare metal, and it looks like bare metal and shit, but there's minute shit in there. So you got to get in there and actually clean with a chemical and all that stuff and then seal. And a lot of times people will just start welding shit together, and when you go to weld something in and stuff, I mean, 9 times out of 10, there's not a lot of people that actually use a weld-through primer in certain areas. You know,
yeah, and they do in others, and then don't in others. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, if you're wondering why it costs so much to do that, I mean, I would sure hope that they did it that way, and that's the reason why it costs so much.
Because all that rust repair and shit, like, okay, you get into something that's got a little bit of rust, and then you open it up. It goes from a fucking quarter to a softball real quick. Mm-hmm. And, you know, depending on if you don't have parts or if they don't remake body panels and shit like that, you know, you got to cut all of it out. You have to.
You continue on the project as planned, or you bail or you find a donor car. Or...
Yeah, well, even donor cars. You can find donor cars turn out to be just as bad as what you have.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And if you turn around and you buy a donor car that's nicer than what you have, why the fuck are we working on this one?
Hopefully you didn't get in too far.
Yeah.
Until you realize that.
Yeah. But I mean, I've seen people that have bought 3 cars to build 1 car, and they thought it saved them money. It would take you just as long to cut all these pieces off to find out these pieces suck to begin with. It's fucking crazy. Moving on from that, once you get all the metal prepped and all that shit and you get it sealed, now you start doing body work and things of that nature. And when I mean body work, I mean fucking throwing mud on something. Actually starting to block and everything like that. And when you're looking at some of these vehicles out and about, and their gaps are perfect, and you have, 3/16, an eighth of an inch gap around everything.
Yeah, I think most people want an eighth.
And it's absolutely spotless and perfect. The sheer amount of time it takes just to do that is unbelievable.
You have to know how to pick that kind of stuff up. If you're going to walk around car shows and you're really looking at details about cars, gaps are a big thing to look for.
That's a big telltale sign if somebody puts some effort into it.
Right, yeah.
You got to remember, if you're buying parts that are new, doors and shit like that, none of it fits. I don't care. Like, you can tell if somebody just bought a fucking quarter panel out of a book and just threw it on. Like, in order to get the car to be perfectly straight, and you had to buy extra parts for it and everything like that, and put fucking fenders and doors and fucking quarters and all that shit on it, the amount of time to get all that shit square and to make it absolutely perfect is just out of this world.
In our experience so far, it's been 100% of the time.
Yeah, like, we're working on a C10 right now. We literally put brand new fenders on the damn thing, brand new doors, brand new rockers, inners, outers, lower A-pillars, cab corners, and we bought an entire bed from a fucking book.
And there wasn't one panel that was really true. Yeah. It was really just bolt on and it's good.
Yeah. We had to add metal to... add metal to the door gaps. We had to add metal to the cab where the door's at.
You had to slice and shrink in the fender.
Yeah, so we had to take the fender off, and there's an internal bracketry or an internal structure that runs from the top of it down to the bottom of it. And in order to get this to fit, because it was so fucking crowned, we had to slice it 4 places just so it was lay flat-ish to the existing door and the rest of the whole thing.
And these are brand new panels from
Taiwan was the sticker.
Yeah.
But these are brand new panels. We're talking about Auto Metal Direct, people. We're talking about Summit Racing.
LMC,
we're talking about LMC.
The big name companies.
Yeah, we're talking about all these people.
I don't know if it's a inconsistency with their stamping process or however they put their panels together, but it's inconsistent from left to right, front to back.
Yeah, you're looking at a $200 panel. You're looking at a $250 fender that shows up, and they charge you $75 for fucking shipping. So it's $300 fender, which is great if you have a bunch of rust repair to do, and it's like, well, fuck. Instead of cutting off the bottom piece of this thing, it's going to cost so much less money if I just put a new one on.
Or so you think.
Yeah, so you think. So you spend $300 on the fender, and if you bought it from somebody and they charge you 30% on top or 50% on top of parts, now you're looking at a $450 fucking part, and then they got to turn around and they got to spend, I don't know, how many hours to get it to fit right, because you got to put it on, take it off, cut shit, put it on, take it off, cut shit, put it on, take it off, cut shit. Then you put it on, and then you got to finagle fuck yourself in there, and you got to tack the son of a bitch somehow.
Yeah.
And luckily you got the damn kick panel torn out because you're rebuilding the kick panel too.
And that might take you 6 to 8 hours.
Yeah, who knows?
Just to make that one panel fit right.
Right.
If that, it might take you 2 days.
I don't know. It takes a while. These are, you sit there and you ask, you go to car shows, I can't believe it costs you that much money.
Well, here's why. Because if you're looking at a car and everything looks right, and you know that things were replaced on that car, if it wasn't an original car that came off the factory, I mean, even off the factory sometimes they were kind of iffy like that. If that car looks right, gaps are completely straight, the body panels are completely straight, they put some work into that.
Yeah. And if they didn't do a bunch of fucking work like that with the metal, and they put a whole bunch of fucking mud on the damn thing, you're still looking at a shitload of time just to get that mud to be straight.
Yeah, right?
Because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to sand something down. And then not only that, after you finally, let's just jump right past the mud work, because you're fucking playing with clay and you're sanding. That takes hours and hours and hours among itself to get every single square inch of a car to be perfect. We're talking about the little tiny area underneath the turn signal and the area between the headlight to the turn signal.
You're talking about all these tiny little areas of the car that no one even thinks about, and you got to do it multiple times, multiple stages. Right.
And if you got to hammer and dolly some shit before you throw the mud on, if you're trying to get perfection right off the bat, if like some of the concourse shit that I did, it had to be like 1/8 of an inch between metal and top of clear. So you're looking at how many hours of hammering and dollying and shaping and forming and all that shit before you put mud on it. You got to skim coat, and then you got to sand, and then possibly skim coat again, depending on what you're doing. And before you even start skim coating and shit, you got to seal everything. So you got to put a couple fucking 2-3 layers of sealer on top of that. And then if you're going to do high build primer, you got to put another fucking coat or two of high build primer on that. And then you sand all that shit the fuck down.
Multiple times.
Yeah. And that's just to get it to paint, people. And you wonder why paint jobs are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. So much goes into it like that. And we're not even going to talk about how much paint costs and material cost, because you could go with some crazy red color that's thousands of dollars for a fucking gallon of it. And that's before you pay 30% on top or 50% on top. That's the crazy shit. The process of painting itself is time consuming, because you got to paint, let it flash, and then you got to jump back in and paint again. And if there was any runs or anything of that sort, you gotta address them right away. Same thing with the clear. And if you're doing multiple layers of paint, if you're doing detail work and you're doing custom paint work and all that stuff, I mean, you could have hours and hours and hours and hours into just taping stuff off, because paint just doesn't fly on the damn thing. I mean, you literally got to go across every fucking square inch of this car and tape it off so you're not getting overspray on everything. And, there's tricks to it. if you got to paint the inside, you got to paint the inside. And then you got to make sure nothing, the process is just asinine and ridiculous. And then after you're finally done painting everything, guess what you get to do next, Randall?
Get the wet sand.
Wet sand and buff. And there's only one way to make it fucking amazing.
That's wet sand and wet sand and wet sand.
I mean, you could be sanding on the same, sand the same car 4, 5, 6 times, depending on how many different bits of sandpaper you're going to use and wet sanding and everything like that. And then after you're done wet sanding, you go back and you just start buffing.
Buff and buff and buff. And
hopefully you don't burn through.
I was getting ready to say that.
Next topic we're going to get into, we're going to jump into the assembly and the mock-up here. And when we're talking about mock-up and assembly, if you're doing it right, you're literally building this whole vehicle first. This whole fucking thing needs to be damn near built. And then you blow it up, tear it all apart, and then you reassemble it whenever, like, all the pieces are finalized and painted and whatever. 9 times out of 10, if we're doing a full-blown build, we're sending out the frame to get powder coated. Or if we're doing a paint job on the frame or whatever, I'm not fucking powder coating and I'm not painting shit.
And if you're doing
until I know where everything's at and cutting holes in it,
yeah,
welding shit on it,
right,
all that stuff.
And if you're doing like a new chassis or new suspension, most likely they're gonna come. They might come painted or powder coated if you order it that way, but a lot of the times it comes bare metal, and you have to go through and paint all that. And obviously, if you're doing a custom chassis, you don't want to go painting everything before you go putting it together, because guess what? You're going to end up grinding paint off.
Hopefully you got a good painter that's used to fucking touching up shit.
Right.
Because then you turn around and you got to do that shit all over again.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, been there, done that. How many times? I don't know. I can't count that fucking high. But when we're talking mock-up, we're talking like we're not going to just paint everything and then drop a fucking engine in something. At least a normal shop wouldn't. Or if they're doing it right, you would think. I mean, not saying that there's only one way to do it, but for fuck's sake, people. For fuck's sake, people. Okay, let's say you want to talk about why shit costs so much. Let's say we did paint the whole damn thing first, and then we decided to fucking throw an engine in the son of a bitch, and we chipped it halfway through the son of a bitch. Or we're fucking taking so much time and effort not to scratch something because it's painted already. And, okay, now, guess what? We picked an engine out that's way too fucking big, and guess what? Now we got to cut into the firewall. So we got to cut into a brand new paint job, into a brand new firewall, whatever, and do that shit. Or how about, here's a fucking thought, how about we paint the whole damn thing, and then we decide, well, why don't we do some custom touches on the dash inside? Or why don't we do some fucking custom touches on, Uranus?
And that's why it costs so much.
Yeah, and that's another reason why something costs so much. If the damn thing isn't built properly, if it isn't planned out and fucking done appropriately.
And a lot of times, if you're not careful, they could charge you twice for it.
Yeah, they could charge you twice. How do you know?
Yeah, 2 or 3 times even maybe sometimes.
Right.
And that's why the mock-up process is there for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, if you're customizing stuff, like you can't just because you've done it one time on another vehicle doesn't mean it's going to take that little amount of time or that lot amount of time. Every single vehicle is fucking completely different, especially with customizing. And a lot of these things are organic, so we're building shit and then all of a sudden we're turning around and it's organically forming into something completely different, Randy. Or the client decides that they just saw something somewhere else and they were like, that'd be fucking cool, so let's put it in on mine.
Yeah, and that happens. You just have to be ready for it.
Not only do you need to mock up for a fucking engine, but also we need to talk about mocking up all right, if you didn't buy that custom chassis and frame and everything and you got to build suspension and you got to upgrade suspension and stuff, this stuff all needs to be planned out prior and during the mock-up stage. That way you're not, like I said earlier, welding tabs to the frame and grinding into the frame to make room so you can weld shit on and whatever. And it's so much easier if you can just make adjustments and not have to worry about shit being painted or fucking finalized. The mock-up stage is so important, and if you can chip shit and smack on stuff and be kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Cavemanish, I guess. You can almost be, smack shit and throw shit and whatever. That's where the mock-up and bare metal and stuff like that is okay, and why it's so fucking important. Because that, you can't just be throwing suspension parts on there. And, you end up drilling a hole into the frame or drilling a hole somewhere, and you screw something up, and now you got to weld it back together and fill the hole or whatever. That mock-up takes a lot of time, but it's extremely crucial. And that goes straight into like doing exhaust work and everything. Like, yeah, you can do exhaust work after paint and shit like that, like if you really wanted to.
It's always nice to do it when the body's off or the bed is off if it's a truck.
Right.
But you can just kind of get to everything.
Unless there's areas like you're going up over the rear end or something like that, depending on what kind of frame it is. But
especially with the older vehicles, like the 30s, 40s, and 50s vehicles, they have pretty narrow frames. So if you're trying to do a 3-inch exhaust through there, there's a lot to consider. And you have very small amounts of tolerances to play with.
Yeah, that's just with the exhaust. A lot of times, like if we go back to the engine, mocking up engine, same thing with the rear end or suspension, any sort of suspension or anything like that. These people want fucking rack and pinion steering and everything nowadays, and power steering pump and all that shit. So there's not a whole lot of room to do stuff like that. And you got to custom make shit. And if that shit's fucking painted already, like granted, we got to do stuff that somebody comes in and they're like, we want an upgrade. The car's already done. You got to know, as far as mocking up goes and shit, like you got to be real precise about things like that. Because
and careful.
Yeah.
Be careful.
But that mock-up stage takes a long time. Like it takes fucking time to do shit right. Like I can just throw shit together and be done with it. We can just cut fucking metal out, put metal in, and then mud a big fucking clump of shit over it.
Yeah.
And be done with it.
But are you done with it?
Yeah. This takes fucking time and effort. And time and effort, ladies and gentlemen, costs fucking money.
It pays to pay for time and effort.
Yeah.
It really does.
And you got to think about some of this stuff. Like if you got a $300,000 build, well, depending on what the fucking hourly rate is, if you're at a shop, it's $150 an hour, $100 an hour, 40 hours at $100 an hour. Guess what? I'm no mathematician, but that's $4,000 a week.
Yeah, a week.
If you're looking at a full-blown restoration at $100 an hour just in fucking man hours, a lot of times you're looking at 1,000 hours. It could literally just be like 1,000 fucking hours. Let's just say you're $75 an hour. $75 an hour, 1,000 hours, $75,000. Boom, just like that. Mm-hmm. Before you fucking did anything that has to do with a new part.
A lot of this stuff takes weeks in itself.
Yeah.
Just weeks. One part of a car.
Right.
Could take weeks.
Or
even a month. Especially if you're making your own panels.
Mm-hmm. And you got to remember, just to fucking do an exhaust, like, you have to cut and look, and cut and look. You're making pie shapes on everything. A lot of times you get a couple of 180s, you get a couple of 90s, you get a couple of straights, you get a couple of 45s.
And you got to sit there and think like,
how can I put this fucker together?
How can I put this together without wasting material?
Yeah.
How can I put this together without having to buy another kit?
Yeah. So you tack everything up, and then you take it all out, and then you weld it all in, and then you put it back up and see if maybe you welded, it fucking warped on your ass.
Yeah.
And if it warped on your ass, guess what? You gotta fucking do it again.
Put a section up, check it. Put a section up, tack it, check it, tack it. Just put another section up, check and tack it, take it down, cut another piece. Hopefully you got all that right. And then if you like it as much as I do, you try to make the left side look like the right side.
Yeah, well, you have to. It's the way it fucking works, man.
Yeah.
Once you get all that squared away, now we're talking about just doing fucking fuel lines and brake lines. You can just buy fucking brake line for shit, or you can make brake line.
And we're not just talking about like bend it wherever you feel like, and then just kind of mashing it in there and just kind of forcing it to get it to work.
Yeah, we're talking about straight as an arrow, and it's going to fucking come down off the cross member or down the frame rail. It's going to have a fucking 45 here and a 90 here, and it's going to run perfect. And then when you're underneath there, all your spots that you fucking have hold downs for it are literally like, this is a 1.5 feet apart and another 1.5 feet apart. It's aesthetically pleasing, even though nobody's ever going to see it.
It's going to look like it came from the factory like that.
Yeah, even the factory don't even fucking make it that nice.
Right.
And that's just, we're just talking about brake lines.
Yeah.
We're just talking about brake lines and fuel lines. You know, it could take a couple of days to do it, depending on what the fuck you're doing and how far you got to go and what all craziness. Because if you're double flaring and all that stuff and making fittings and shit like that, you know, these things take fucking time. And then that's not to mention if you're making vacuum lines, hard vacuum lines and everything, you know, when you sit there and you ask why this shit takes costs so much, and then you're really not looking at what the fuck is going on. Because if you're really attention to detail here, you should be noticing that, look at them brake lines.
Uh-huh.
There's 2 lines running side by side that bend at the exact same spot.
Yeah, and not 3 inches apart.
And not 3 inches apart. And those brake lines don't have 4 circles. They don't loop 4 times and look like some fucking moonshine still. Like, okay, don't get me wrong, like that's all fine and dandy in certain applications, but for fuck's sake, man, I'm done with it. Fucking done with it. But that's just me. Call me an asshole. I don't care. I know there's plenty of vehicles out there, and somebody's going to hear this and be like, I have that, and you're a dick. Thank you. I already said it for you. I appreciate it. But I mean, I appreciate it. Don't get me wrong, as long as it looks good. But if it's finagle fucked together, I'm good.
Yeah.
But I'm good on the moonshine stills. We're just at the fucking brake lines, and we're not even talking about customizing and building shit from nothing. You got to remember when we're building shit from nothing, you know, you got to sit there and stare at it. Nobody talks about the engineering something in your head before you even touch anything.
And a lot of times you do that for free, just because sometimes you don't even feel right charging the customer for that shit.
How anal do you have to be to just make sure, like, okay, we're building this bed right now, and it's on its nuts, so we got to raise the bed floor. But in order to raise the bed floor, we got to be able to make a structure underneath, and we can just start slapping shit together and just measuring stuff, but we need to make sure that fucking bed's square, and straight, and level, at least to the frame, you know?
Right.
We have hours and hours in just making sure the fucking truck is level and ready to be started to have assembly on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's before we even start customizing. And a lot of times when you start customizing, this also goes back to rust restoration. Like you go to start customizing something, you might have to restructure something completely different before you can even start making something. And that especially goes for fucking rust repair, which we didn't even talk about. Like just to put a floor in something, nobody said that you had to remove the outer rocker, the inner rocker structure, the lower A-pillar, the fucking kick pan, and some of the fucking rear seats area just to put a fucking floor pan in because of how bad it is. And like I said, that goes for customizing. Like in order just to build a firewall, you got to make sure the whole entire fucking cab and fenders and everything's square to begin with.
Right. Got to start with a good foundation too.
And all this stuff takes time and effort. And none of it, they don't show you. Any of that shit on the 30-minute fucking program on Discovery Channel. Or whatever channel, Motor Trend, or Speed, or fucking TNN.
About the only one they do is, what's that show that you watch? Texas Metal.
Yeah.
About the only one they do that is Texas Metal.
Texas Metal, I mean, they don't even show much of it. You got to, like, if you're just watching it, it'll just keep going by.
Right.
That shows some serious fucking engineering and figuring shit out.
Yep.
It's awesome.
It's a lot of, and going back to the setting everything up, everything is triple, quadruple whatever checked. It's checked every single time you change something. If you're welding.
Yeah, we welded onto okay, so we set up a damn bed on this truck, and we got it where we wanted it, and then we tacked some shit in, and then we checked it again.
Because guess what happens when you weld?
Fucking expansion, contraction.
Yeah.
So you gotta go back over.
Just to double check.
Yeah. Because if you don't, and you just start fucking putting shit together, next thing you know, you're done with the truck and something's fucked up.
And you don't know what. Something is.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe you don't fasten the body down to the fucking frame and you body work 1.25 inches more metal down at the lower corner of the back end of a fucking car, and then when you fucking you finally put it all together after it's painted and everything, and you finally cinch the son of a bitch down, you realize, oh my goodness gracious, something's wrong. Well, I put a tail light in 3/4 up from the other side, but the way it was sitting on the frame, it's straight as an arrow. But now, guess what? It's not. Ask me how I know. But we're just giving you some detail here so you understand what the fuck we're talking about when it comes to why this shit costs so damn much.
And oh my gosh, we can go so much deeper.
Yeah.
It's just...
But we're going to tie off the second topic with the wiring situation. I know a lot of people don't like wiring. People don't like to do wiring because they don't understand wiring. But for fuck's sake, Randy, you can go ahead and talk about the wiring.
Oh, it's a blast. I love it.
Right.
It takes a long time. It really does. Yeah. If anybody tells you they can wire a car in a couple hours or a day, I don't even know if I'd listen to it. I don't know.
Maybe a fucking go-kart.
Yeah, maybe. But
I don't even think a golf cart.
The stuff that we're doing, it really takes longer than that. It takes a while. I wouldn't, sometimes even a week to really fully do it. Week and a half to 2 weeks. If you sit there and finish the wiring, and if you say wiring, you think about just routing the wires, right? But what people don't realize is that if you're doing it to the specifications that we like to do it, I mean, you're talking about adding heat shrink to where heat shrink needs to be added beforehand, before you complete the connectors, so that when you add loom, that you can heat shrink all the ends so everything is nice and it looks almost factory-like. I like to make everything almost like factory-like, if possible. Sometimes it's a little hard to do that, but
it's one thing to make it look factory, and it's another thing to make it look right. Because even some factory wiring harnesses are just fucking bulky and shitty.
Yeah, if somebody's telling you they're going to wire your car, and I'm sure they can wire it in a day, but
it's going to look like shit.
Most likely.
And it's going to be fucking house wired with little twisty ties.
Most likely, yeah. But that's it. That's all you get is just the wiring. You don't get protection. You don't get wire protection. You just get the wire routed and maybe half hooked up in a day. But you also have to think about the battery connections, the alternator connections. If you're doing fuel injection, there's a lot more connections to finish there. If you're doing air rod, you have a lot more connections to do with that.
Right. If you got 4 fucking doors and all 4 are controlled, power windows are controlled from the driver.
Right. Like a Lincoln.
Fuck yes, exactly what I'm talking about is a Lincoln. And another crazy thing is, you got to remember, just when you open a fucking door, you got to remember there wasn't a lot, like, depending on what year we're talking, when you open a door, lights didn't turn on back then. You didn't have courtesy lights.
Yeah.
You know how much fucking effort it takes to put courtesy lights in? A 4-door? Just put courtesy lights in anything is a fucking pain in the ass. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going. You were talking about alternator wires and...
Yeah, and if you have extra stuff like power windows and fuel injection, air ride, you have maybe even power seats. You might even have power seats in these old cars.
And then if you're adding on other electrical shit, like let's say you got vacuum operated fucking headlights, and now you're turning them into electric headlights.
You have that. If you have a low car shifter or electronic shifter, if you have electronic gauges, if you have an updated stereo, all this to take into account that this isn't just a 49 shoebox where you can just hook up the distributor and your ignition and your headlights and call it a day.
Right. You got to remember like Randy was saying, every single end of a wire is going to be it's going to be crimped properly. It's going to be heat shrunk properly. Everything's going to be routed properly. And then after it's all routed properly and everything, we're not just going to fucking zip tie it. We're going to put loom over everything. And this all takes time. Lots and lots of time. And then people start adding shit. So now you have a wiring setup. You have a harness that's built for something. And now you got to add something to it. So now you got to figure out how the fuck you're going to tie in something new.
Yeah, what are we going to tie this into?
What are we going to tie this into to make it look decent? Because I fucking hate whenever I look under a fuse panel and there's just a wire plugged into something. And fuck you. Don't do that. It's just ridiculous. That's even like if it's fuel injected. Or even if it's a carb, but if it's got electronic choke on it, like you got to remember, you got to run wires to all this shit. You got to run a new wire to something.
And for electronic choke, you also have to test it and make sure it works.
Yeah.
And you can only do that when it's cold. So guess what? You got to start it up, make sure it works, and if it doesn't, then you got to
wait till tomorrow morning. Or
Try
fucking after lunch.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But we're going to wrap up that second topic and move on. We could talk about electrical fucking all day long, but the last topic we want to talk about is test driving. Squeak and rattle, the shakedown.
After you get all that said and done.
Yeah, after you're done listening to all the other bullshit we just talked about, now we got to actually drive the fucking car. Like, just because it's running now and it can go into gear doesn't mean it's fucking over.
That doesn't mean it's done.
Yeah.
Does not mean it's done.
Yeah. And sometimes whenever we talk to clients and stuff and it's fucking running and driving, all of a sudden they're ready for it. It's close enough. They're just bring it home. And it's like, you have to understand what goes in to just test driving. And Randy and I had these conversations. And a lot of clients and people don't believe that they should be paying full price, full hourly rate whenever you're test driving something. But you got to remember, when we're test driving something, we're looking at everything. We're making sure that when you hit the brakes, when you apply the brakes, we're feeling to see if is the back right. Does it feel like the back right rear brake is gripping a little early?
Yeah, are the brakes spongy? Are the brakes working properly? Is the brake booster working properly? Do you have enough vacuum?
Does it sound like something's fucking leaking? Does it sound like something's rattling? Did I just lose a fucking hubcap? Just because we're driving, it doesn't mean we're out having a fucking jolly old time like St. Nick.
Just doing burnouts.
Doing burnouts, running the piss out of it.
Doing donuts by the neighbor's house.
You got to remember, we don't even fucking get the damn thing up above 50 for the longest time.
Hardly, yeah.
Just trying to get it to fucking run and operate.
We're watching gauges. If you have vacuum gauges hooked up, transmission gauge hooked up, we're taking notice. You're setting TV pressures. We're making, and once you set a TV pressure, if you have the gauge hooked up, you're going down the road. And you're making sure all the gears are reading proper PSI. And
when Randy's talking about TV, he's talking about a kickdown cable, or basically sum it up, you're telling the transmission when to shift.
Yeah, a lot of times, if you're doing automatic, it depends on what transmission you have, but they're pretty finicky. A lot of transmissions are finicky on how you have that set up. And if you don't have it set up right, guess what? Your transmission is going to be blown, and you're buying a new one or getting that one rebuilt.
Right.
Whether it's our fault or their fault or whose fault it is, it's just something that you have to kind of pay attention to. And if you overlook it, then it could cost somebody money. Yeah.
And that's not to mention cruise control. Like, do you know how fucking difficult it is to set a cruise control to do 65 mile an hour with a 4-speed and fucking ridiculous gear ratio in the back? For it to actually, like, as soon as, depending on what gearing you have in the rear end, if you don't have 5 gears, 6 gears in the fucking transmission and you let off the throttle, that son of a bitch is already slowing down right now. And if you have a generic, like if you have a cruise control system that's trying to run off a fucking carburetor, you can be done, but it's going to, like when you're driving down the road, it's going to constantly be speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down. And if you don't do this shit right and you don't know what the fuck's going on, like, it's not going to work out, man.
Right.
That cruise control is now like, we can do it at 55 because your gearing will allow that. But if you were running 65, 70, don't put the cruise on.
Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't like that.
Yeah, it doesn't like that at all. There's nothing I can do about that without fucking really doing something crazy.
Yeah.
Because I've ran into these situations.
Right.
But this is all part of the test drive. Like, I've driven down the road during the test drive, and a lot of times, not very many people know this until it's too fucking late. But if you got like certain rims, whether they're made out of aluminum or whatever, like they'll work their way free as far as like you torque them down. Actually, you should just be doing this no matter what the fucking wheels are made out of. You drive it for a little bit and you fucking torque it down.
And you retorque
Talking about the lug nuts.
Yep.
And then guess what happens? You drive a little bit more and then you fucking torque them down again.
Yeah.
Because if not, you look in your rear view and be like, something's fucking weird about that tire.
or you feel it going down the road, just like it's like a. What is it? It's like a
shimmy.
A shimmy.
There's a shimmy back here. I'm not sure what the fuck's going on. There's a shimmy and a fucking shake.
Yeah.
And it ain't a good fucking shimmy and a shake. Next thing you know, you're fucking sitting in a ditch because your wheel popped off. Some bitch passing you at 55 and you're throwing sparks.
That goes for trailers too.
Yeah, damn it.
Yeah.
Shimmy and a shake back there ain't no good. But yeah, the fucking test drive. We're not just fucking lollygagging out there.
No, really not. I mean, yeah, it's all fun and dandy, getting to drive your classic car down the road, but we're doing it for a reason to make sure you don't have problems when you get it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody that we work with, I try to tell them we need to do 500 miles because I feel like that's an appropriate. In 500 miles, there's a lot that should be shook down and adjusted and all that shit.
Yeah, and depending on how that actually goes, it could be more.
Right.
Or less, but...
Or less, yeah. A lot of times, 500 miles, you're looking at, like if you had break-in oil or something.
Yeah, break-in periods,
rear end, tranny.
Yep.
I mean, tranny, I think, is a little bit longer. Rear end's a little bit longer. I think it's like 1,000 miles for a rear end or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's...
Depending on the gearing. Maybe it just depends on the manufacturer.
Right. But yeah, it all costs money. And the fucking crazy thing is, like, not everybody, but a lot of people, they don't want to fucking pay for the full price on the on these type of things, which is fine.
Yeah,
like, I don't even
it's
feel
understandable. It's not like we're wrenching on it all the time during this process. I mean, we are wrenching on it here and there. We do sometimes you get a coolant leak or a fuel leak, and you have to wrench on a little bit. Maybe
adjust the brakes.
You have to adjust the brakes, or
steering's not quite on. You got to take the steering wheel off and
whatever
move it a fucking tooth over.
Yeah, you still have, right, and that's just all minor shit like that. The steering wheel thing that takes you like 5 minutes to, you bring it back to the shop and you unbolt it and you take it off and put it back one notch over. It really only takes 5 minutes.
Well, depending on what steering wheel it is.
Right.
There's some shit,
and that's why I always leave my horn off. That's why I always leave the horn off and everything until I'm done with it. And there's even a couple other things that I like to leave open ended until I'm officially happy with it, and then I just go finalize that, because you really don't know. You can try to set up the alignment up as best as you can, and the steering wheel alignment up as best as you can when it's sitting there in the shop. But once you don't know for sure until you get going down the road, and you do end up one tooth off. If you do at least align as best as you can. I like to do that because I don't want my steering wheel at 10 o'clock and 9:30.
I don't want it to fucking pull me to the, we were wearing the fucking tires out already, cupping the shit out of them.
Yeah. But that takes a lot of extra effort, and it does take a lot of extra time.
Yeah. And same. So we have a Holly system. We have a sniper system on this one truck right now in the shop. And it's a self-learning system. And there's only one way for it to learn, and that's to run it. So if we were to just put this thing together and then give it back to the owner, and then he just gets in it and starts fucking doing whatever he wants, like, it's going to start rough. It's going to idle rough. It's going to sound like fucking what the fuck's going on at some point in time.
Doesn't know what to do yet.
Yeah, it doesn't know. It doesn't know. And if we don't have time to really try to do it right, we can't
rush these things.
We could put all the fucking time and effort into building this vehicle, but if we don't have the appropriate time at the end to finalize this shit, almost the most important part, like, why would you want to spend all this money to have a fucking ticky-tacky fucking vehicle that doesn't run right? Because it didn't do the due diligence on the test drive because you got a little antsy or you wanted it back, or you just didn't do your due diligence on this stuff. And this is why it costs fucking money.
Yeah.
Like, the whole topic here is this is why it costs fucking money. And just because the whole damn thing's put together and everything doesn't mean it's 100% done. How many vehicles have come to us that they say it's 90% done and it's maybe 50%? Yeah, it's got interior in it. Yeah, it's got an engine in it. Yeah, the transmission's in it. Yeah, the fucking paint job's on it. But it's not wired. Nothing's hooked up right. The shit that's hooked up right ain't fucking hooked up properly.
There's no plugs in the engine, even if there is one in there.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on.
Right. And this is why it costs money. This is why, if you're doing it right, it's going to cost money. And if you question why it costs $300,000, like, really look at what you're looking at, man. Really open your eyes. You can't, like, if you're just walking by something, you're like, fucking, why is that? Like, really look at the detail.
And realize what it takes to get there.
Yeah. If this truck or car or van or station wagon, whatever, sounds amazing, runs amazing, looks amazing, and you're still questioning why they cost so much, I don't know what to tell you now. If you've sat through this whole fucking episode, I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm hoping that we clarified, like, really went into some detail here. Like, these podcasts aren't for everybody. Like, we got relatives that are like, we're not car people. Well, I just don't know. I'm not fucking making this podcast for you. Randy's not taking his time out of his day to make this podcast for you.
No, it's here for the people who actually want to know and learn about this side of things.
Or even fucking build shit.
Yeah.
Because there's one thing that I know, when we're talking to people, like, nobody fucking talks about this stuff. No, okay, I can't say nobody, but there's not a lot of people that talk about this shit. And I just want to get the point across that, we're here for this. We're here to give you a whole new world of hot rod building and shit, man. At the beginning of this podcast, we said about this week that this is dropping, is Thanksgiving. And I just want you to know that if you made it all the way to here, I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for all the crazy shit that's been going on in the I.B.F.HotRods world. Thankful for the wife, thankful for Randy, thankful for my family, and thankful for all you crazy bastards that take your time out of your day.
Especially you, Pete. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, especially to you, Pete. You know who you are. I hope this episode has done justice for you. But we're going to get rolling out of here. And before we leave, like and follow and share for us. We can't reach as many people as we want without some sort of help organically from you guys. And every time you like, comment, or share on any of our social media, whether it's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff, it helps the algorithm. And if you don't know by now, if you follow us on Facebook, you can follow a lot of our builds. We drop a video either every Friday or Saturday that just goes over what we've done throughout the week. And some of the IBF Hot Rod world. TikTok, we drop shit all the time over there. YouTube, we really need to be pushing more of that. But you can find just every avenue, you can find different content from us. And hopefully one of them will tickle your fancy. And if all of them tickle your fancy, even if they don't, just follow, like, and share as much as you can. Like I said, grateful for you guys. Happy Thanksgiving. And Elliot Slack over and out. Here's Randy if he's got a closure.
Yeah, I'm definitely thankful for everything that's happened to me in the last year. Thankful for Elliot, Melanie, and the cats, and thankful to be where I'm at today, no doubt. And I know a lot of the kind of stuff that isn't for everyone, but the stuff that we talk about, we hope to reach more people in our field, and anybody who's trying or willing to work on these old cars or motorcycles or blah blah blah, whatever. We only hope to reach those people in some way or another, if it's not this podcast or YouTube or Facebook or whatever. And we're definitely growing as a partnership and business. We want to see more on our YouTube side and TikTok side, and that will happen down the road. So just if you don't think we've done enough through all that, just keep watching. It'll come. And if you like what you hear, obviously what he said, share and tell your friends about us. And if you do, obviously we're thankful for that. And if you don't like what you hear, share it anyway.
Give us some shit.
Yeah, give us some shit.
Give us some shit. We'll take the shit.
Yeah, we can take it. But that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening to this episode.
And as always, this one goes out to you guys. Here's to you. Cheers, buddies.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode of It's All About the Build podcast. Please comment and let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel to follow along, and if you haven't already, check out our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok to keep up with what we have going on every week. Thank you all for listening.